Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to AXA Coral Live. It's wonderful to have you all with us. We have schools from the UK and Spain today, and a very special shout out to all the Year 8s with Mrs. Rawlings' class at Collinsman Grammar, and also a big Curacao welcome to everyone at Lady Elizabeth. Fantastic to have you and all the other classes with us. So this live lesson is Meet the Coral Scientist, all about the process of studying the amazing reef environment. Now we're going to come to a Q&A section later, so please do get all your questions in. There is the Q&A app to the side of the video. If you've got the video full screen, you can always post questions using a second device, such as a smartphone. Any tech issues, click the chat app, that's the icon in the bottom right of any of the web pages. But this is a really important live lesson for me personally, and twinned with what we're looking at on Friday, caring for coral. It's an important thing, and I think it's important for me because we live in this age where we see so much concern about the natural world in the news. And I refer to a quote from an educator called Fred Rogers. And he says, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers, you will always find people helping. And today we are talking to two young researchers at the beginning of their career, and science helps us to understand the natural world, and then on Friday we're looking at what we can all do to help with that information in hand. Now we're broadcasting from a research station, from the Kamabi research station on the island of Curacao, and it's a fantastic place to be. It means that researchers from around the world can come and be close to the environment that they're studying. In this case, the coral reef. So you can be out on the reef, collecting samples, and we'll find out a bit more about that in just a bit, and then come back and use some of the facilities here, whether that's the dry labs, the wet labs, the equipment, so you can do further study without having to put all your samples in a big box and ship them back to your university. It's a very special place to have nature and science going hand in hand. But without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome to Coral Live, as part of this Meet a Coral Scientist live lesson, Ninka and Virginia. Welcome to Coral Live. I love having scientists explain their career on these live lessons, because I think it's really great for young people to sort of see that this is something they can go to in the future. Just to give a taste of what being a coral scientist is like, Ninka and Virginia, I'm going to ask you one by one. What's been the wowiest moment so far in what you've been doing here on Curacao?
For me, it's the moment that you go down underwater, scuba diving, and you start sampling, and you see all these organisms like an octopus, and then you look around and you see a turtle swimming, and you take your samples, and in between you look around and you see this whole underwater world full of life, and then you slowly go back up and then there's dolphins swimming around. I think these are the best moments of being a marine scientist.
Virginia?
Yeah, for me it's also of course underwater. So we go with all this equipment. We have to dive, go down there, and we just feel like a fish, even though we have all these things just floating around and just doing all these precise things that normally people do on land, but we are just able to do it underwater. So for me, that's super special and really wow.
feeling like a fish. Fantastic, fantastic. And you've got some of the equipment that you're using. And in this sort of first section of this live lesson, what we're going to look at is sort of like some of the kit and what a typical day is like in terms of being a coral scientist. So I think you've got some of the equipment. You've got some dive equipment here. You've got some sampling equipment here. Can you take us through what you've brought for us?
Yeah, I will first show the diving equipment. So this is what I dive with. So you've got here a regulator, and this is what you can breathe through on the water. So you put this in your mouth and you literally breathe air, which is in this tank. So further, I have like 2 bags because I take samples underwater. And these samples, I put them in these bags. I have these Ziploc bags on this clicker. I take them off, open them underwater, and then I put them in here with the samples. So then I also here have a GoPro. So if I see anything cool on the water, I can film it, I can show it, and in my samples I know what I took, where I took it. This is inflating this vest, so this makes sure that you can float underwater. And here I've got the meter where it says how much air I still have in my tank. So when you go down, you use the air, so you need to keep track of how much air you use and how long you can stay down. So when your air goes down, you know I need to go back up soon. And then we've got.
Come and sit down. We don't use this. This looks amazing. What's this one?
So this one I put around my arm, and this is basically a notebook for underwater. So it has several pages and a pencil. This is a regular pencil that you use in school as well, but you can write on this underwater. So I write down at which depth I take my samples.
So you're being just like a typical scientist, but everything adapted for working in the underwater world.
Yes.
And Ninka, I think you've got examples of some of the things that you're collecting underwater.
Yeah.
And we've got the rubber gloves going on.
Yeah.
They're in the cool box. Let's see what kind of things you've been collecting.
So here I've got samples that I took yesterday scuba diving. So this is an example. This is a sponge. So you can see the osculum exposed. It's this hole in here. And this sponge takes up the water and has also pores on the side. And there's a water flow going in and out of the sponge, and that's how it feeds. So this is an example of one, and they all look very different. So I brought one more example. So this is also a sponge, but a different one. And the holes in here, the pores through which the water flows, are a little bit smaller, and they look slightly different.
And Ninka, you were telling me earlier that you take these samples of sponge, you bring them back, you take them down to about -80. Is that right?
-20.
-20, okay.
Yes.
So you're freezing them.
Yes.
And then you're powdering them.
Yes. So first I cut this in tiny pieces.
Yeah.
Then I freeze them and I let them dry. So
Okay.
all the water will be out, and then I put them in a mortar. So I grind them into little powder.
And what are you hoping to find in these sponges? Because sponges, amazing animals, a first multi-celled animal on our planet, I think, taking all that water in and out every day. How does that help us understand what's going on the reef?
So what I use the sponges for is that I look at what substances and nutrients that come from land. And since the sponges filter this water, they will take anything that's in the water, they will take it out. So I will see whether there's influence from land, if sewage from people. I can see that in the sponge itself, in the tissue, and that's what I will be measuring.
Sewage from people on the reef.
Yes.
And that's something that we need to get less of, I'm imagining? Or
That's
we
not
don't know?
per se the case. We
Okay.
don't know. It can actually, it's not known whether it's per se bad or good.
Okay.
That's what we are trying to look at now. So where should the sewage outflow be? Is it better there? How healthy is the reef? How does it influence the reef?
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. And so for your work, Virginia, it's again being underwater, but you're not getting sort of physical samples so much like of living things. You're looking at the water itself.
Yeah, so my samples are a bit less colorful. So I mainly go on a boat or also diving, and then I have this beautiful instrument here, which is called a Niskin bottle, and then I deploy it in the water, or I take it with me when I'm diving, and then at the depth that I want, I just here press this one, and then
So this button here. Oh,
and it closes. So I get all the water that is in that space. I get it here, and then from here, I take these syringes, and then I get the water into the syringes.
okay. So I'll hold that up just for you, so you can,
Yeah.
so people can see it a bit
Yeah.
more easily.
Yeah, thanks. So then I get my water samples in these syringes. So I have two types, and then I analyze these water samples, and then I do this for nutrients, carbon, nitrogen, silicates, things like that.
All the different things. I think it's really easy from sort of a beginner coral point of view to think that the ocean is just like a bath or a swimming pool. It's all the same water everywhere.
Yeah.
But in fact, what your role is to understand that the water is different
Yeah,
in
exactly.
different places.
Yeah, so coral reefs are extremely rich environments. So like there you have all these species, but actually nutrients are very, like you don't find that much because they take up all of them. So what we are trying to find with this, at least in my project, is like the nutrients that the coral reefs take up, if they come from land, and then we can see that sign from land, or if they actually come from the ocean. It might be a difference of like in certain areas the coral reefs feed more on, I don't know, ocean water, and then they do better, or might be the other way around. So that's what we are trying to look here.
Amazing. I'm just going to
Yeah.
put that down so I don't sort of hold it up for the next. No. And so it's been great to sort of see we've got sort of the dive equipment, we've got the samples of sponge here, we've got the trusty Niskin bottle that you've just showed us. What's a typical day like? Are you spending all the day underwater? Do you feel like sort of fish now? We're searching here. Between the two of you, you know, are you getting up at sort of like 3 o'clock in the morning, or what's a day like here?
We don't get up at 3 a.m. That would be a little bit too much, but we try to start early in the morning.
Okay.
Get up and go at 7:30ish. And then what we do, at least for my part, is mainly put on your swimming suit, grab your diving gear, and drive to different dive sites. And I dive twice a day, take all these samples, and then I come back to the lab and cut them in tiny pieces and put them in the freezer.
And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's because I've seen you busily going between sort of labs and here, sort of during the day. Is it sort of like, you know, is it a 12-hour day basically? Is it nice hard work in the field?
Some days.
Yeah.
Some days can be definitely long days. So you start early in the morning with the diving and you're still in the lab until quite late. And some days are a little bit easier. You take it easier. You only do one dive and half the work in the lab. So you need to balance that you don't get exhausted, and you manage to do your work well, because you need to be able to focus as well.
Okay.
But it feels okay, even though it's such long days, because you get to dive, and that is very exciting.
Yeah.
And the same for you, Virginia? Is that a sort of like early up, get to the
Yeah.
sites?
So especially when I go on the boat. So on the boat we go with all this equipment and also with that thing over there that we will show later.
Perfect.
CTD to measure some stuff. And then, so we go on the boat quite early, take all our samples. We also do some dives to take samples closer to the reef. They come back, analyze all the samples, and yeah, those days can be quite long, but yeah, very exciting. And if you like to be out there at the sea, then it's beautiful just to spend time on a boat or diving.
And being a coral scientist, is this the good bit that lasts for a short amount of time, or is this what you're going to be? Is this life for the next sort of 3-4 years, diving every day?
I think half. So like we will have field work seasons, like maybe, I don't know. So for example, next spring we will come here for 3 months, take all the samples, go back home to the Netherlands, analyze all the samples in the lab, and then probably in autumn we will come again. So maybe half a year here or a bit less, and then half a year analyzing everything on the lab and writing everything that we do so people know about it.
Brilliant, because I think one of the questions that had come through was from Mrs. Rawlings' class about what a typical day as a scientist is like, and it seems that it's this mixture of exploration, good solid equipment, and detail. Exploration and detail, does that feel like the 2 words?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes. So there you go. It'd be great. Does it need two of you to operate the CTD equipment? And I'll just talk to the students about what's going on. Just after we see the CTD work, and I'll explain what a CTD is in just a section, we're going to be looking at for you in the classroom, how you can get this type of job, or what the progression was for Ninka and Virginia from being at school to investigating the coral reef. CTD, very, very standard bit of equipment for marine science. The C, T and D stand for conductivity, C, temperature, T, and depth. And when we talked before about the importance of remembering that the ocean changes, like through the different depths of the ocean, it's different types of water, the CTD helps us to look at that. Conductivity is how we measure the salt content. So we know that seawater is salty and fresh water not so salty. So if Virginia finds, using the CTD, that certain things are coming through fresh water, we can guess that those are more likely to come from land. And on the other hand, if it's very, very salty water, where these nutrients or chemicals are coming from, that's most likely to come from the open ocean. And so what they've just showed there is that you put this probe, this piece of equipment, into the ocean, and then you are looking at the different types of ocean water. So being a scientist is really about collecting samples and then turning those samples into data, looking at patterns, asking questions. And from my point of view, I've always thought that this type of science, and there's a huge team here, that each person is working on an individual part of a jigsaw. And so we've got looking at the deep ocean and what you might find in sponge. We're looking at the water column and the different layers of water as we go down. And through all those, we can find a better picture, bigger picture of what's happening with the amazing coral reef. Now, you just didn't suddenly spontaneously appear as scientists. I mean, you were at school once and you had hobbies and interests and everything else. Did you ever imagine that this would be your job, your career when you were growing up?
I think I dreamt about it, but I did not see it per se happening straight away. So I've always been on the water, actually, sailing, surfing, always wondering what's underneath me, because you don't see that from the surface. You don't see what's going on and the rich life that is underwater. So for me, it was a dream to do this, which in the end I made into reality, and now it's my job, which is amazing. But I think it's good to see that it's possible.
Yeah.
And I've always been interested in biology, and then you see marine biology, which was even more interesting, and then you study, and then you realize that it's possible to make this dream come true.
And was it similar for you, Virginia?
Yeah, so it was always on my mind, and so I come from Madrid, which is really in the center of Spain, so we don't have sea. It's quite hard, but my parents would take me every summer to the beach. We had a small boat, so we would go every day on a boat. I really remember the first day I put my mask and my snorkel on, and then seeing all this life underwater, like normally you would see in an aquarium, but then you can just see it live, and that was like really, really special for me. So like I always said, like, okay, I really want to end up here. It was a lot of work, a lot of studying, and a lot of being brave and go for it. But then you can always do it. So.
And then at school, were you? It seems that your passion has come from the ocean, from water, and then the science sort of followed. Was it something that came naturally to you, or did you really have to work hard at it?
I think a bit of both.
Okay.
So for me, the curiosity of what was underwater and what's going on and the processes, that's what's the science part. And so the marine science part is that combination. So it's, you need to work to get into science, you need to work hard. But you can see with marine scientists, often there's a lot of passion.
Yeah.
So a lot of passion for the ocean, for the sea, and for the underwater world. So it's the combination of hard work and the passion for the water.
And so if you're sort of, 11, 12, 13, 14 at the moment, make sure you've got the science subjects still going on. Are there other subjects that you would recommend to keep on studying?
Well, writing, like we also have to write a lot, so go for grammar and all the writing courses, because that's very, you don't imagine it, but you need it a lot, I would say.
Okay, and the math side as well?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think that I was quite bad at that at school. I just had to work very hard to get that done, but you actually need it a bit, so.
And then, so you did that, you left school with this dream of something, and you applied for what at university as your first undergraduate course?
Biology.
Biology?
Yes.
Biology as well.
Biology. So there we go. And when I'm going to university, you do your 3-4 years of undergraduate, and then a lot of people then leave university and go and do a job as whatever. If you're staying in research, what do you do next? Do you leave and there's a separate research job, or do you stay in the university system?
There are several options, but most of it is through university. So you first do your bachelor's degree, then often you do your master's degree, and that's all within the university. And then now I'm even still working within the university as a postdoctoral, as a doctoral researcher. So it is often related to a university or a research institute, where Virginia is working.
Yeah. So for me it was very much the same. I also worked in some volunteer works or stuff like that to get more experience. So I also did that, to get more experience about restoration projects or stuff like that. So that's also a way where you can learn more stuff and be ready for.
Okay, so from what I'm understanding, you've got 3 or 4 years as an undergraduate bachelor's degree. You've then got 1 or 2 years doing a research master's.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you've got 4 years doing a doctorate, a PhD.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at the same time, if you're interested in doing a specific thing, volunteering with projects out in the world, or restoration is a really useful way to build up your skills and experience.
Yeah.
And then once you've got your wonderful doctorates in however many years' time, what does it then look like going forward? Do you stay in the university and get grants and build teams and do more research? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so if you want to stay in research, that's indeed the idea. So you continue basically what you've been doing, but you become a more independent researcher. Okay. So that's kind of what we are learning now in a PhD, is from being supervised by an independent researcher to becoming your own independent researcher and know how to do it from the beginning. So what do I want to study? Sending a proposal to get the funding for the study, to actually doing the study itself. So I think in that way you grow as a scientist. Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of really cool questions coming through, some of which you've brilliantly already covered, but we'll go through them anyway. The first question is from a Lady Elizabeth School. Thank you very much. And it is, what is your favourite coral reef to dive on and why? What's been your favourite dive and why?
Well, for me, I think it was in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was in Malapascua, and it was a dive just to see the fox shark. So it's a shark.
Okay.
It's quite big, but their tail is as long as the rest of their body. So like they actually thrust it like this to kind of make fish go a bit
stunned.
Yeah,
okay.
And then they eat them. So like we saw it, we just dove to see this shark, which for people is actually very nice. Like they would never do anything. And for me that was amazing, just seeing this huge shark coming to you and just like not caring that you're there and just
For me, it's I think it was in Thailand actually. So there are these really minuscule animals called nudibranchs.
Sea slugs.
Sea slugs.
There we go.
Exactly. And they're very colorful, very small. So you really need to search on the reef. Where can I see them? And there were many there. And I think that was amazing to see these tiny, colorful slugs underwater.
And in fact, on the website, we do have a nudibranch gallery because we love them so much too. We have a great gallery of all the different colours and shapes of nudibranch. The next question, lovely question, is what is the best thing about working on the coral reef? What's the best for you?
Ooh, the best part I think is what we do here, which is to get to dive. So I think it's amazing that you take your samples and you get to explore the reefs, the underwater, like you get to know everything. So now when you go underwater, I'm like, okay, that's that. And then you take your samples and you see all these animals around you. I think that's the best part of it.
Yeah. For me, I think it's also fascinating to see that there's such an amazing system that sometimes because of the conditions or like where they're situated, you would say, okay, here there should not be a reef or the reef should be very degraded. And nevertheless, you see that it's glowing, it's beautiful, you see so many species. So like there's so much that we don't understand. And for me, that's very exciting to go dive and see that there's so much that we can still learn.
Brilliant. We've got... from Inverclyde Academy, we've got being a coral scientist looks like a dream job, but can it be tough and difficult? You've given us the good side. Mm-hmm. What are some of the maybe tricky or tough parts of the job?
Well, I think like what I said, what we do here, the field work is the best part. But then there's also a lot of other things involved. Like first we need to analyze all the samples in the lab, which is often quite hard work, long days. And then we need to analyze the data and write it down. So we need to write down in scientific papers what we find. So we can show it to other people, like, look, we found this, and then new ideas for other research questions come up. But this writing part is very difficult.
Yeah.
And what kind of percentage for both of you is field work, lab work, and write-up? Would you say it's sort of like a third, a third, a third?
Maybe that's a good estimation. So I think for us, like probably every year, at least these first years, we will be a bit more in the field, maybe like 5 months per year, 6 months per year, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Then at the beginning, it's a bit harder to write, I guess, because you first need all the samples, all the analysis, and then lab work is also very long. So
And the writing comes later on.
Yeah.
So that's why you do the field work mainly in the first 3 years, and the last year is mainly writing. And analyzing data also costs a lot of time. So it's a combination of data analysis, writing, and also reading beforehand, reading into the topic, and the field work itself. So it's kind of 4 components.
4 components. We had another question, Lady Elizabeth. How did you become a coral scientist? You brilliantly already answered that. But if there are particular students in the class who want some more detail, do get them to be in touch either via chat or via the email. The home editors, so the home education group, would like to know, what's your motivation? What motivates you to do this job?
Well, many things. For me, I've always felt very passionate about corals. And this is really like being underwater doing field work for me really motivates me, and to understand more how these systems work, and I think that's what really motivates me every day.
Brilliant. Do you want to add to that, Ninka?
Well, I think there's so much unknown.
Yeah.
Just like I said, and I think, this curiosity that you want to get to know the system. I think that's the main motivation.
And come on, question is how long's a dive? How much air do you have, and how long do you spend underwater?
So it depends on how deep you go, actually, because if you go deeper, the pressure is higher. So the air you take in, you take up more air in your lungs. So if you go deeper, you can dive shorter. So often our dives are somewhere between 45 minutes to 90 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, the same for me.
About that. So I'm for diving underwater, there are a variety of amazing things, all the way down from using standard scuba equipment. You're down at 40 meters. I think you've got about 6 minutes out of an hour of actual work.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of doing all your safety stops and everything else.
Yeah.
And then I was working with a team a few years ago who went on 6-hour dives with rebreathers and everything else, because they were going super deep.
Yeah.
But about 45 minutes an hour, a bit more.
Yeah, if we are in very shallow waters, you can go much longer. But normally I think it's 45 minutes or an hour. Yeah.
Okay. This is going to test you. It's going to test me as well. This is Isaac from Colleton Grammar School. This is a great question. How many life forms can one growth of coral support?
Ooh. That's a complicated question to answer, I think.
Isaac, it's a complicated question. You're asking all the right questions. I think the first thing to think about is that globally, coral reefs support 25% of all marine species. So 1/4 of all the different living things you find in the ocean have some form of support coming from the coral reef. And that number will vary hugely. You'll have some reefs, especially in the coral triangle, I'm imagining, which are hugely diverse. And the coral triangle, if you look at sort of the islands of Southeast Asia, you'll see a triangle of coral. By the time you get to the Caribbean, we're a little less diverse, I think. So it varies hugely. It's an excellent question. We need you to come and help answer it. So keep studying and get to that degree, and we'll see you out here in about 10 years' time. an ethics question, I think, which is, are sponge samples taken while the sponge is alive? And you're taking bits of living things from the reef. How does that work from an ethics point of view?
That's a very good question. So indeed, I take the sponge samples when they're alive. So I see them on the water and I take a piece. For the sponges, often they're quite big, and I take a tiny piece, which they might even recover properly from it and even grow tiny little bits again. The thing you need to weigh, like what weighs more. So is it like getting to know the reef, how to conserve the reef, to keep it healthy? Is that more important than taking one sponge sample? So that's the ethics behind this. You need to think about that as well, and also what you take, how much you take.
And do you have, because I know there's been sort of a lot of sponge research here over the years, is there sort of guidance you shouldn't take more than this much from an individual animal, or is it more having a feel for it when you're underwater because it's so different every time you dive?
So the thing is, you try to take the minimum you need. So I know approximately how much weight I need to analyze. So I try to take that and not more than that. And you take it at different places, so not just one spot where all of a sudden, if everyone takes all the sponges there and they're going to be completely died out, you try not to do that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And a really great question on science method. Another really good question, we talked about fresh water and salt water and using that to understand where the different chemicals for life or that are bad for living things come from, whether it's ocean or land. But do you find corals in rivers, or is it just a marine ocean species?
No, sorry. I think so. You might find them in places where you have the mix of salty and fresh water a bit, but they definitely grow in salty water.
Okay, so they're not a freshwater type of animal. We find them in the ocean, but in some parts of the ocean there is more of a mix of river water and ocean water. But really great question. Wow, we've got 7 minutes and 7 questions. So let's do this.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. How long does it take to get used to diving? And that's from Rains Park.
It doesn't get too long. So to get your open water license, it's basically 3 days and 4 dives. Then you've got the basics. So then you can go on the water and dive already. So that's, I think, pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And does that mean? How long does it take? Because you're not just diving underwater, you're working underwater. How long did it take you to sort of feel that you're just working like normal?
I think it's it depends per person. Like if some people feel more comfortable.
For you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
For me, I think I got the feeling. So I started diving during the summer, and then if you dive a lot of times during a period, you get it much easier. I got it much easier rather than if you do it one day and then 6 months later another time. So I think for me, within a summer, I felt like I could just manage it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great question from Lady Elizabeth School. How do corals survive during the winter if there is much less sunlight for photosynthesis for the algae inside their tissue?
Well, here in the tropics, we don't have that problem, right? So we always get the same amount of sunlight.
So it's very, very for someone who comes from Northern Europe, being in the tropics is very, very odd because we're used to long mornings and long evenings. Here it goes from being day, basically. The sun comes up, it's up for 12 hours and then it goes down. And that's pretty well the same every day.
Yeah.
So great question. For photosynthesizing corals, they like the tropics, which is a great place to do field work as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, wow. We're covering this a bit more later in the week, but I'm going to put the question out there. It's from Esther at Colleton Grammar, and the question is, how effective are artificial reefs at the re-establishment of coral on the seabed? Should we save that one for the restoration team?
Yeah.
Esther, it's a really great question, and in fact we have people who are specialists in coral reef restoration, and they'll be speaking with us on Friday. If you're not joining that lesson, Esther, we can always send you a little quick message after that. Lady Elizabeth School, this is brilliant. This is again a really niche, important question. Can they genetically modify algae in the laboratory to make them resistant to higher ocean temperatures? That's from Lady Elizabeth School. And so this is talking about the relationship between the Photosynthesis, which is the type of algae, plant-like living thing, inside the coral tissue. That supplies 70 to 90% of a coral's food, and can be disrupted by higher temperatures. Higher temperatures can lead to bleaching, so that's when all this coloured algae leaves. And so can we, get our GM stuff going to try and sort of like bioengineer or hack nature? We're still finding out more about this relationship.
Yeah.
Is there what is the relationship between certain species of Photosynthesis and certain species of coral? Can we bring some from one place to another place? And I know there's a really great work being done in the Red Sea, where they're finding some coral resistant to that, but we don't have that answer yet. There are, as we can see with the current level of science, there are no quick fixes to keeping the coral reef healthy. You probably know quick fixes out there?
Yeah. No, the quick fixes, they still need to be determined. It's science still needs to be done on that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out. We don't know enough to say this will work.
But I think we probably don't need to look for a technical solution. What you're looking at is in fact ocean health, water health, living in a way that is in harmony with the reef. Those are the kinds of things that we are more looking at.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes. We've got 2 questions. How can we stop the coral from dying? And that's from Delilah at Colleton Grammar. It's a bit of a deep question, but I think the one half is what you do brilliantly, which is finding out how it works better. But if you were to ask young people who are watching to think about one thing that they could do which would help the reef, what might that be?
Well, I think, I'm not sure everyone agrees on that, but it's also been shown in some parts of, in some reefs, that locally what you do in reefs will help corals resist water temperature changes more or better if there's like a higher water temperature. So things like if you go to the beach, use the proper sunscreen that doesn't have stuff that would damage the corals, or don't litter at the beach, or try to be as clean as possible when you go to these environments. I think stuff like that would already make a big impact.
And for somebody who's in the Netherlands or in the UK or Europe, not close to the reef, what might we be able to do if we're far from the coral?
I think to reduce the pollution, your pollution in general. For example, if you can bike to school, if you do not go to the other side of the world just to fly there for a week. These kind of things are a way to reduce your pollution in your daily life.
Brilliant, thank you, Inka. One last question, and then that's sadly what we've got all we have time for today. And the question is it going to be possible for the bleached corals to recover? The coral reef has recovered and recovered and recovered and recovered over the past hundreds and thousands of years. It's only been able to do that because these big stress events have happened every 30 years, every 50 years. If we're hitting the reef with stress events, whether that's bleaching or there's more storms, then there isn't that time to recover in between those events. So nature is wonderful, but we need to support and help nature. Thank you, Ninka and Virginia, so much for being part of AXA Coral Live. It's been fantastic to get an insight into the sort of everyday working life of a coral scientist, to hear your passion, your motivations and your experience. And thank you also so much to all the young people watching. It's very sadly goodbye. That's all we have time for today. So bye-bye from Coral Live. It's been absolutely fantastic having you all.
Bye.